Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where I've been teaching people how to live a life of wellness, tap into their passion, and go for their dreams for over 15 years. I believe living well and dreaming big starts with ourselves. This podcast will show you how to create a healthy, holistic life, empower your mindset, follow your dreams, and make a big impact. Let's dive in right now. Welcome back, everyone, to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm very excited for today's episode. I'm talking with Rachel Smith. She is a functional medicine practitioner, a hormone, gut, and autoimmune expert, and the founder of Natural Health Rising and the Natural Health Rising podcast. And I first met Rachel when I actually had the chance to be on her amazing podcast as a guest, and we had a really fun time. We were talking about career burnout and a bunch of other things. But through that process, I learned that Rachel has a very interesting story, her own personal journey about how she got into what she's actually doing today. And so I wanted to have her on as a guest to really share her story with everyone listening. And she has so many tips around autoimmune disease and avoiding toxins in your life so you can really live your healthiest and best life. So that's what we're going to be talking about today in this episode. And welcome, Rachel.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. This is so fun. And we got a chance to chat before, but it's going to be fun, I think, to dive in a little bit deeper to hear a little bit more really about your story and your journey. And I've been having so much fun checking out what you're up to. And you have an amazing Instagram feed for those of you on Insta. Check out what Rachel's doing. She's always sharing tons of tips out there and lots of videos and things like that. But let's kind of just start out by hearing a little bit about your journey and about your story.
Sure. So, my gosh, let's see if we go all the way back. When I was a kid, I was honestly, looking back, I was actually pretty sick, but it seemed very normal. I always had digestive issues. I was told I had asthma when I was a kid, even though that's not actually true. It turned out to be a dairy sensitivity. So I was in and out of doctors all of the time. And it just became pretty normal to me. And eventually I was just like, this is how my life has to be. But, at the time growing up, I was eating standard American diet. I was eating conventional dairy products and cereals and processed foods and all that kind of stuff that was not good for me. And then as I got older, I did get into fitness. And so I did start to see a different lens of health and started to change my diet a little bit more. But I got to a point where when I was about from like 18 to 21, my health really started to get super bad. My hair was falling out. I was having heart palpitations. My digestive issues got worse, panic attacks, anxiety, all sorts of crazy things. And I thought, this is really strange. I'm so young. I don't know why my body is going through this. And so I find myself back in doctor's offices again, just like when I was a kid, going in and out. But again, I was never getting answers for anything. My blood work was always normal. No one could ever do anything for me. And a lot of people turned me away to even do deeper testing just because of my age. And they thought, you're just anxious or depressed, or, that's just things that you need to deal with, or do you want a pill for that? And it wasn't until I had very bad heart palpitations one night. I was admitted to the emergency room and the doctor insisted on doing an exploratory heart surgery on me. And
exploratory heart surgery. Sorry, I have to.
Yes. I don't remember if I shared that last time we were talking.
That's crazy.
But they said, your EKG is off. So we need to see if there's an electrical issue. So we're going to go in through the major arteries in your legs. We're going to connect to your heart and we're going to stimulate you with drugs and see if there's any electrical stuff going on. So I was very hesitant, but I said yes because I was so scared. I was like, when you're in that kind of position, stuck in a hospital bed, you'll say yes because you don't know where else to turn. And they wound up finding nothing wrong with my heart. And that was really the last straw for me, where I was like, I cannot take this anymore. I have to start doing something different. And kind of along that same timeline is when I really started reading different books, reading nutrition books, all sorts of functional medicine books. I started listening avidly to podcasting, and I started to take tidbits and put together my own almost my own diagnosis. I know so many people have to do this, unfortunately, and found a functional medicine doctor who diagnosed me with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease. And he said, okay, we have to change your diet. We have to remove all of these kinds of inflammatory foods. We have to heal your gut. You got to work on stress management and kind of that whole holistic piece. And as soon as I did that, also started working with an acupuncturist and an herbalist and all sorts of different practitioners. And just within a few months, my symptoms went away, probably about 75% of them. And my mind was just blown at this. I thought, I have to tell people about this. I have to do this. Like, how can I make this my job and help other people stop from suffering for so many years like I did? So I quit my job in corporate America and went back to school and started studying biochemistry and all sorts of different science courses until eventually I wound up taking the FDN program and kind of getting to where I am today. And so now I get to help people who have autoimmune diseases and crazy mystery illnesses and hormone problems and gut problems and all of that, and help them heal their body through nutrition and lifestyle change.
Wow, that's such an incredible story too. And it's so amazing like how it's come full circle for you. Like now you're helping the people that, you were once suffering from this too. So that's gotta be really cool too, just to like, wow, you've been in their shoes, you know what it's like.
Yes. And I think a lot of people enjoy that piece too, because if if you're just going to a standard doctor and they don't understand those kinds of illnesses, you really get written off a lot. And so when someone's already been through it, then not only are you building rapport, but like you can really empathize with someone and how the journey goes and how the process goes.
Yeah. And your story is unique. And yet in the same way, like I've heard so many stories from so many guests that have been on this show that in a way there's some overlap, there's similarities where they struggled with something for years and just couldn't get the answers and kind of felt like, okay, what's wrong with me? But no one could find anything. So it's, in a way, it's, as you said, this is something that people go through. What was it like for you when you finally heard, okay, this is what it is. There's actually like a diagnosis here. And then you saw those results so quickly. I mean, after years of struggling, I can't imagine.
Oh my gosh, there were so many emotions. I think there was a lot of anger coming up. Like, how could all of these other people not have found this? There was a lot of relief to know that I had a diagnosis and I had something to work on. And there was a lot of fear of, oh my gosh, I have this thing. Oh my gosh, I have a disease. And I got diagnosed when I was about 22, 23. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck with this thing. So there's a lot of fear. But once I started working on things, I started seeing those improvements, then my mindset started to change about it.
Yeah. You had like this roadmap, you had solutions, and it sounds like you had support, which I think is so huge too.
Mm-hmm.
So autoimmune disease, I mean, it's still a fairly new term, at least for, I'm sure many of our listeners are familiar with it, but of course some people might be wondering, okay, I've heard of this, but what exactly is an autoimmune disease? Like what fits into this category? Because it's sort of like this broad category. So tell us a little bit about that and like, how does someone actually develop this? Like, can it happen to anybody?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we all have our immune systems that are working every single second of the day. So they're trying to protect us from toxins, from pathogens like bacteria or viruses. And we have these, I like to think of them as defenders inside of an army. Like you have this army system, that's your immune system. These antibodies are a part of that immune system, and those are what are going to go attack those foreign invaders. And when we develop an autoimmune disease, it all goes into overdrive. So instead of those antibodies or that defender system going to attack the viruses or the pathogens, they start to attack our own body's tissues, which is what is developing or considered an autoimmune disease. So some common examples people have probably heard of: rheumatoid arthritis. That's where the body's going to start attacking your tissues and your joints. So you might have difficulty using your hands, or maybe some pain and inflammation in your feet or other joints. Mine is Hashimoto's, which is where the body attacks the thyroid gland itself. You have diabetes that attacks the insulin producing cells. So we have all these different ones, and there's over 100 different autoimmune diseases nowadays. And So how do you develop this? Well, in conventional medicine, they'll say, we don't know, it's genetics and it's just something that's going to happen. There's no solution to it. You just have to take maybe prednisone or some sort of immune suppressing drug, and that's all we can do for you. But when we look at it through the lens of functional medicine and holistic health, we believe that this is a multifactorial disease development. So, like, one thing that's really big is leaky gut or gut permeability. So, that's where the intestinal lining starts to break open. And this is where those toxins and pathogens and food particles leak into the bloodstream, and that causes a lot of inflammation. So as soon as that starts happening, that inflammation can show up as brain fog, skin rashes, headaches, a variety of symptoms. And a lot of people experience this, but over time, as it gets worse and worse and worse, I think of it as a spectrum, an inflammation spectrum, to where eventually one day you can hit that full blown autoimmunity. And so some other factors that play a role in that is nutrient deficiencies. So if we start to break open the lining of the gut, that's where we actually absorb a lot of our vitamins and minerals. So without proper vitamins and minerals, our body doesn't function right. So I think of it like gasoline for a car. If you don't have gasoline for your car, it's not going to run. So if we don't have vitamins and minerals for our bodies, it's not going to run efficiently, right? We see a correlation between certain gut pathogens and autoimmunity, like H. pylori infections, Giardia, or different parasites. So that's something that I look at when we do gut testing, and we want to eradicate any kind of pathogens that could be causing that autoimmune disease. We see stress play a really big role, and this is any diseases, right? Like any kind of illness, any kind of symptoms can be triggered by stress. And we all know that we live in a really crazy world nowadays, and we're just overpacked lifestyles, overworked. We were talking about this right before we got on, like all the things that we have to do. So that's a factor, and that's a trigger for people. And then we have environmental toxins. So toxins are hiding in our household cleaning products, in our cookware, and our beauty products, in our air, in our water. So these things can get inside of our bodies, and then that can start to shift the functioning of the immune system and of hormones and different factors as well. And then at the very, very bottom of all that, I put genetics. So a lot of people think that's one of the major causes, but really when we look at it, genetics is there, but it's more about those other environmental and lifestyle factors that are really going to push the body towards expressing that gene and to developing the disease.
So on one hand, what you're saying is kind of good, because you're like, oh, it's not just about genes. It's all these things that actually we could control. We could make a change with. On the other hand, that's a lot of factors to consider in a person's life, right? So I'm sure for people listening, they're like, oh my gosh, like, that could feel really overwhelming. So let me ask you this, because, you kind of mentioned there's like this conventional approach. And of course, there's always a conventional and an alternative approach to basically every disease or health challenge. And oftentimes, I guess they pretty much seem to be on polar opposites of the spectrum on what we should actually be doing to treat the condition or to heal. So when it comes to autoimmune diseases, like, what is the conventional approach? I mean, you kind of shared a little bit about all the different things you would look at if you're looking more holistically. What's more of the conventional approach to treating?
Yeah. So normally it's trying to treat the symptoms and not address any of those root causes, right? So it's some variety of drugs based upon the disease. So for example, if someone has like psoriasis or rheumatoid arthritis, they might be prescribed methotrexate, which is actually a really strong anti-cancer drug, and it prevents the cells from multiplying. And so this can be, as you can imagine, like if you stop your cells from multiplying, you're going to have some major issues down the line, replenishing your gut lining, replenishing bone marrow. It depletes the body of folate and B vitamins. So like, yes, you might be helping with some symptoms in the shorthand, but long-term, we could do a lot more damage to the body. Another really common one is prednisone, which a lot of people know that's a steroid. So any kind of steroids also going to suppress the immune system. And so if we go too low with suppressing the immune system, that actually makes us more susceptible to developing common colds, common infections. We could start to have a variety of symptoms like irregular heartbeats, fatigue, muscle pain. So it really changes your life. Like a perfect example is my grandma. She is on that kind of stuff. And she's like, oh, I'm scared to go on a plane or go to the grocery store or play with the grandkids because she has such a heightened response or ability to catch something simple that could actually push her over the edge and make her really sick. So these drugs have side effects. They deplete the body of a variety of vitamins and nutrients. They can damage our gut and liver, and they can lower immune function. So there's a lot of side effects to these drugs.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, on one hand, we've come so far because of people like yourself who are doing the functional medicine approach and supporting people with this. Like, we've learned so much. And yet at the same time, it's like, wow, we have a really long way to go. I mean, I think I was looking this up. It wasn't until the 1950s, I believe, that the term autoimmune disease was actually like used or developed. And for decades after that, it was still something we haven't had that much research on. And I think even still today, we're still learning about it, I'm sure you would say. Yet autoimmune diseases seem to suddenly be on the rise too. Is that because we now have this knowledge and more people are coming out, more people are supporting, like we have more knowledge to identify them? Or is it because our modern lifestyle, as you mentioned before, has just gotten crazier and crazier, and this is like increasing the actual events of having autoimmune disease?
I think that could be part of it, is the actual diagnosing for sure. That could be a part of a lot of increases. There's also something called the hygiene hypothesis, which is pretty interesting. And that hypothesis is, as we have become more efficient at creating antibiotics and creating antibacterial soaps and all these sanitizers and things like that, we're actually overdoing it. And so we do have beneficial bacteria in our guts, and we need those to thrive, and we need those to support our immune system. So as we've increase the use of those things, antibiotics, antimicrobials, whatever, we've actually disrupted our own immune function, and we've become less resilient to regular pathogens and viruses and things like that. So that's the hygiene hypothesis. And then I would say another really big one is the whole toxins, environmental toxins. As we produce more and more chemicals in the United States, and we're using them in everything, these things are really, like I talked about with the root causes, that's just a major issue with that. Even things like spraying glyphosate, these herbicides and pesticides on our food, people eating more processed foods in the United States, consumption of sugar and refined carbohydrates and sodas, and all of these things are inflammatory to our bodies. And so that plays a big role too.
Yeah, there's so many factors, and I want to talk more about toxins. I know we're going to dive into that in a little bit, but before we do, I mean, as you think back now to when you went on this journey and you started making all of these changes, what were some of the things that you had to make a change with to like really start healing and really change the outcomes that you were getting? I'm just curious.
So I actually thought I ate pretty well. When I had gotten into sports in high school, I started following a lot of like bodybuilder plans and nutrition plans online. So I was eating lean chicken meat and veggies and stuff, but then I was also eating oatmeal for breakfast every day and quinoa and lots of grains. And that might be fine for some people. But we do see that with autoimmune diseases, grains and gluten, I was eating gluten also, but grains and gluten can actually add to breaking up the gut barrier and can add to inflammation and add to gut issues. And so that was one of the things that I removed from my diet. And I really saw that had a major impact, especially on my like bloating and constipation and brain fog and energy, just from taking that out, and especially the gluten part of it. So that was one of the things. And yeah, I removed all sorts of processed sugars and packaged foods, or if I was going to do a packaged food, I would switch to something that was very high quality, like a paleo based snack or something, or like make my own kind of snack. And nowadays we have so many amazing options for swaps for that stuff now, which is awesome. And really started focusing on also balancing my blood sugar with nutrition, where I think this is super important. Eating 3 solid meals with fat and proteins and carbohydrates. And I remember I used to snack a lot throughout the day. And so eliminating a lot of snacking and making sure my blood sugar was really balanced was big for me too.
Wow. I mean, just that alone, when you just think about like food and nutrition, right? There's so many like things you can do. And I know you support people and help them with like everything they need to do for the protocols. And of course, everybody's different too, based on what they're currently doing and also
Mhm.
what types of results they're actually getting when you do those functional lab tests, which I know is something you also offer people. And it seems like that's so important too, because right now out there, whatever the topic is, whatever the health condition or the health challenge is, right? You hear like, oh, here's everything you should be doing, right? But I'm a firm believer like everyone is different, right? We're all unique. And if we can get that inside look with the functional lab testing, like it's like, oh, okay, here's more what we need to do. Talk a little bit about why doing the testing itself is so important to help people to actually reverse the health issues.
hmm Yeah. So I did say I got pretty well just with changing my diet and things like that. But when I started to do further testing on myself with other practitioners, I saw I had mold toxicity. I had high levels of heavy metals. Mold suppresses the immune system greatly. Heavy metals can affect all of your organs, your nervous system, and things like that. So these are two toxins that I would have never known that were inside of me unless I looked deeper with lab testing. And those are a couple of things that I look at with clients currently. So if someone's having consistent headaches, their immune system is crazy all over the place, they have sinus issues, massive fatigue, they might have some sort of mold underlying component there. And that's not something that you're going to find with standard blood work ever. Gut testing, very important because as I was talking about, leaky gut plays a role in this and infections play a role in this. So if we don't look at what's going on in the gut and look at the digestive function and those pathogens, how are we ever going to fix that issue? So that's very important. And then nutrients, like we could say eat a well-balanced diet and try to do that. But if you are specifically missing a vital mineral or you're very low in B vitamins or something, we may want to support you with that stuff additionally supplement wise as we're healing your gut and as we're getting your lifestyle and diet balanced. Because what happens is if your gut is leaky or messed up, we're actually not going to absorb those nutrients. So we may need to support you and see what's really missing. And that's all individual.
Yeah, I find that so fascinating. And I'm also thinking about listeners who are like, okay, I'm not in a situation where, I'm going to doctors and not finding answers, though there may be those out there who are and are like, wow, I should really look into this. But for those who are kind of more like, okay, I want to be preventative, I want to live a healthy life, and maybe I'm getting some signs and symptoms of different things, like what can people do who are listening who are like, okay, I want to be really more proactive about this. I don't necessarily have an autoimmune condition, but are there certain signs and symptoms that people should be on the lookout for that are like, almost like precursors to like this could go worse if you let it go on for the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many things. If you're just having a couple of symptoms of something and you're just brushing it off, that right there is a sign. Like if it's just, I get really bad migraines every once in a while. It's like, okay, why are you getting migraines? Or maybe someone just is really fatigued and there's someone who they wake up every day, they rely on their coffee throughout the day. Okay, there might be something going on in the gut. There might be something wrong with your hormones and your adrenal glands. Like that's just one symptom that we could take a deeper look at. Do you have some skin issues that pop up? Or maybe you have even something like PMS with women, which women think is so normal, actually doesn't have to be this rough, crazy period that we have every month. So symptom wise, it can be so many things. And so I think from a preventative standpoint, if you just have a couple and you keep ignoring them, that's where you one day will wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, how did I get here where I've doubled or tripled these symptoms? And now I have to really backtrack and do a lot more work. So you can start to focus on like an anti-inflammatory diet, really focus on reducing stress levels, whether that's, and that looks different for everybody. So whether it's like meditation or breath work, or you just are someone who needs to have more fun in your life and go hang out with friends or go to concerts and really take care of your joy and that kind of stuff in your life. Really get good sleep, have clean water, have clean air, and really focus on those basic necessities. And then if you're still concerned about the symptoms, seeing a functional medicine practitioner or health coach or somebody who can assess and say, here are some small changes you can make, or maybe, hey, let's run a couple of labs and just see where you're at, and then do that as a preventative.
Yeah, I love what you're saying too, because it's about like having this awareness about, hey, these are the things that kind of I feel out of balance or I have low energy, and like being willing to say, okay, that's not completely normal. Like we should all be feeling, fairly balanced and energetic. And if you're having these ongoing types of symptoms, like why not look into it further, especially with like all that is available today. And I think being proactive is so huge. Now, we were talking a little bit earlier about the toxins piece. I want to dive into that a little bit more because, when you think about all the toxins out there, it can be kind of mind blowing as you were reviewing some of the things that could be impacting us. And it's like, can we actually, toxins are everywhere. How do we actually avoid them? I mean, if you think about some of the major toxins and just like living a toxic free lifestyle, like what would be some of your top tips on that for those who are like, sounds good, but I can't do this all at once?
Yeah. Yeah. So this one is something maybe a little bit towards the end of the list. Like, hey, let's work on sleep. Let's get your diet together. Let's get some sunshine, some movement, good water quality. And then we can start to dive into the toxins, because that piece can be overwhelming because at some point it's like, oh my gosh, I have to switch out all my products. And so first of all, our skin is very absorbent. Anything that you put on your skin is going to go right into your bloodstream. So women that wear makeup, and even men, you're washing your hair with shampoo. Maybe you're using some cologne on your body. If you're cleaning your house and those particles of whatever you're cleaning with get into your lungs or on your skin, there's all these ways that these things can get in. So we want to look at, okay, what are the chemicals in the products that you're using? My favorite way to do this is just to go use the EWG's website, the Environmental Working Group, because they have amazing resources where you can look up all of your kinds of products and just see where they're at on a rating scale of how toxic is this, how clean is this. And so you can start by just looking through your own products, seeing where the rating is, and then slowly over time, as you run out of things, you can swap them out. So that way it's not like I have to throw out $1,000 worth of things and start all over again. But one thing that I think a lot of people miss is parabens, which are hiding in a lot of self-care products. Parabens can actually be hidden under the word fragrance. So sorry, but your perfumes and colognes that have fragrance in them, they disrupt our hormones and they can mess with our testosterone and estrogen levels. These parabens can be in your shampoo, conditioner, all of that as well. And so an easy swap for that is to look for something that says it is has like essential oils in it instead of the fragrance term. And that will be an easy way. If you still want to smell good, then you can do that. You could even make your own essential oil sprays or something like that if you want to swap out a perfume, or if you want to use a diffuser in your home with essential oils instead of burning candles, or those Glade plugins. Those things are also really bad at disrupting our hormones. So those are some of the top ones that I think a lot of people use, and that could be a good starting place for people to start to switch those things out.
Well, I love it because you keep using the word swap, and it feels like so good because, I think people start on a journey sometimes and they're like, oh gosh, I have to give up so much stuff, right? I have to make all these changes. I have to like take away. But what I hear you keep saying is no, like it's just a swap. You get to trade up, really. It's about trading up is the way I think about it, to like something better that maybe you just haven't discovered yet. So I don't know. I like it. Swap is good.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be overwhelming when you think about it, but like I said, just doing it slowly over time is a good thing to do for a lot of people. And then I'll mention one more big one, which is pots and pans. I see so many people using the nonstick pans, and those are lined with hormone disruptors as well. So again, that's going to disrupt estrogen, testosterone, and that gets into your food. So you can swap those out for stainless steel pans eventually when you're ready for that. And then plastics, anything that is made of plastic is also going to have those hormone disruptors that will actually mimic what estrogen is like in your body. And so instead of you producing estrogen, these plastic compounds can get into your body and will mimic that. And that will also throw off hormone balance. So going from plastic to glass is normally an easy thing for people to upgrade to.
Yes, I remember when I made that switch and, at first it was kind of startling, but then it's like so nice. Everything, and it lasts so much longer too, right? To have the glass or the stainless steel. It seems like everything else like deteriorates over time, which is kind of concerning if you think about it.
Definitely.
But I love it too, because it's like, okay, there's things that you're doing that you're taking internally, but there's also these things as you're talking about that are basically in your external environment too. And as you say all this, I think to myself, like, it's almost like putting on a new lens or like eyeglasses or whatever, and just kind of like starting to look at things differently too. It's like, oh, what could the impact of this be? Right. And for people to kind of start opening up more to that holistic lens and really considering things, because so many people are just kind of going through the motions, kind of doing what they've always done or doing what their parents did. And, they don't think about these things right away until maybe it's too late, or, they have a lot of work to do to kind of reverse it. So I think all of this is just so helpful. So Rachel, tell us, like, what is it like really being on the other side of this journey now? I mean, wow, I can't believe when I think about your story. I mean, you struggled for so many years, right? Now you're kind of on the other end of this. You've completely changed your health. Like, is it easy now for you to like kind of keep it all going? And like, this is just, or do you ever like have challenges and you're like, and you fall back to your old habits, or like, what's it like?
That's a good question. I don't really fall back into many old habits because I've adopted this life. It's a lifestyle. Like, this is the way I live. This is the way that makes me feel healthy and feel good. And this is my, like, kind of like you said, like my new lens on the world is this way all the time. I would say the only thing is I'm more resilient to nutrition stuff. So when I first started, as I was healing, if I would have had gluten or something, it would throw me way off. Years and years down the road, as my body is so much healthier and more resilient, it's like, okay, if I go out, and I still don't eat grains, by the way. So it's like, if I want to have sushi with rice on the sushi roll every once in a while, because I like sushi, like I can have that and I enjoy it and I feel fine. Right. So there's like more flexibility. The more you heal, there's more flexibility.
Did you ever like imagine your career would change too? Like, you're back in this time where you're struggling with your health. You figure out all this with your health. And now you're like not only living this new lifestyle, but you're really helping other people and you have this whole new career. And it's like, wow, it's huge.
It is crazy. I didn't think that I would be here at all looking back. But I do want to finish up your other question really quickly, which is, I still encounter challenges. So I will say that I have a different mentality about challenges now, where back then it was, oh my God, it was what I would call the victim mentality, where, oh, I'm stuck with this thing. This is happening to me. And woe is me. Like, I have to endure this disease. And eventually it transitioned to like a survivor and then a thriver mentality, where it's like, okay, I've battled this thing. I've beat it. And now if something comes to try and knock me down again, I already know that I can do it. And I know the plan of action. And I know that there's hope to overcome this challenge. And I'll give a perfect example. I lived in another moldy apartment earlier this year. So it was a very short time frame from like December to February. And long story for the background of that, but essentially I wound up getting a whole bunch of black mold in my body again. And that knocked me down a little bit. It wasn't terrible because I had everything else in line, but I was like, okay, I know what this is. I know how to handle this and it's fine. Like I can deal with it within a few months. I can get it out of my body and I'm just going to move on to the next thing. And so I would say like the more you work on your life and the longer your healing journey is, the more you can adopt that thriver mentality of like overcoming different obstacles that come up like that.
Right. And you have all these tools, and that's kind of an interesting story that you just shared. Like, even though you have all this knowledge and all these tools, like there's some things we can't totally control. Like, you're in this environment you didn't know, and now you find out, right? Like, and I think for people listening to, it's like, okay, there's all these factors out there, but what can you control? What can you do for yourself so that you can be like as prepared and as healthy as you are to be able to overcome things that do come your way. And I think that's, such a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I know you have a special gift for our listeners, for those who either obviously are already struggling with autoimmune or have a lot of symptoms and are wondering what's going on, but really for everybody who's on this Live Well, Dream Big journey, who are, listening today and they're like, okay, I want to create more energy. I want to be more in balance. I want to make sure I'm reducing inflammation in my life. I want to gain that mental clarity. And tell us a little bit about your 3-day nutrition and detox.
Yes. So you can get the freebie in, I'm sure, like the show notes if you're going to put the link there.
Yes.
And it is essentially taking out a lot of major inflammatory foods that may irritate most people and focusing on nutrient dense whole foods. And there's some examples of places you can shop to get really healthy foods. There is a 3-day meal plan in there. You can follow it exactly or follow something kind of similar to it just based upon the ingredients. And there's some additional tips on, detoxing your body. And this can really just help you understand or see a shift happen like pretty quickly, just see what that's like to relieve that inflammation for a few days. And of course, this isn't like some magic pill, but this is something that's going to take time to implement. If it feels good for you, would say continue doing something like that. But this will help you decrease inflammation, increase some energy, increase some mental clarity, and just feel better overall.
That's awesome. And I love that it's 3 days, right? Because it seems like very doable. Of course, there's 30-day things, there's 90-day, a whole year, and maybe there's more to the journey. But like the point is, like, anybody can do 3 days. And I just love that you've created something so simple that anybody can kind of get started with and really like try it out and then see what's happening.
That's why I did it. Because I'm like, here, well, you can do, like anyone can do 3 days of something. Come on.
Yeah. The world is going at like a faster pace, right? Like we want shorter, this, that. And so like, it's really great though, that you can do something for 3 days and actually like get a result too. So I think that's really amazing. And I know there's probably people listening too, who want to stay connected to you, follow you, maybe actually need support, need to consult with you, or maybe they know a family member or friend. So we're going to put all the links in the show notes, not only to the 3-day nutrition and detox freebie, but to all the ways to connect with Rachel and her company at Natural Health Rising for those who are interested. So we'll do that. Is there any final words of wisdom or anything I didn't ask you that we want to make sure we share today?
Any final words of wisdom? I would say for just general for people, like just kind of step back and view your life for a second out of this lens of like the basics. Am I going outside and getting sunshine? Am I managing my stress? Am I focusing on a whole food nutrients? Like I don't need to get crazy with anything. Just am I eating whole foods? Am I drinking enough water? Like really the basics of things, because I think people get so caught up on, oh my gosh, I have to lose weight and do keto, or I have to do this crazy meal plan or this. And they get hyper focused instead of pulling back the lens and looking at your entire life. Like, are you having fun? Do you have good relationships? Like these really simple things. And if you've looked at that and you feel like you need help with it, then definitely hire somebody, hire a health coach, reach out to me, talk to me more. There's so many resources out there for you to start your journey. And I'll just say it is possible to heal. Like the body is intelligent. It knows how to heal. But sometimes when we have maybe a hidden infection or something going on internally that we can't identify, we need some extra support there. But like once we get past that and we start to adjust lifestyle, it is definitely possible to just have a drastically different, healthier life.
I love it. So many great tips that you've shared today in today's episode, Rachel. I just want to thank you for being here. It was great to have you.
Yeah, it was so much fun, Suzanne. Thank you for having me on.
And thanks to everybody listening into this episode. We'll see you back here next time. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Live Well, Dream Big. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And I want to invite you to take your next step toward living well and dreaming big by downloading the Live Well, Dream Big lifestyle book. It's the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living life on your own terms. You can grab your complimentary copy by going to the link in the show notes or heading directly to iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide. That's iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide.